There, and welcome to another Canon on the Couch. Tonight we have a very special guest, an esteemed National Account Manager with Canon Australia, Colin Baker, who's not only been a photographer and a lifelong lover of photography himself. He actually works within Canon, so it's going to be a rare insight for someone that not only enjoys and loves photography, but gets to work behind the scenes with Canon Australia. So it's a big privilege tonight to welcome along Colin Baker. Colin, welcome. You've been a long-time supporter of CameraPro, and we always appreciate the time that you give us. So thank you for joining us tonight. Now, Colin, yourself, how did you get into photography? Like, it's obviously you've been a salesperson yourself. I believe you worked at Harvey Norman back in your early days. Give us a bit of an insight into your love of photography and where it all started for you.
Yeah, sure. Big intro. Thanks, mate. I'll have to live up to that now. Photography starts before the first job. I have to say it probably goes back to around the age of 8 or 9, going on a family holiday, getting in trouble for taking 24 exposures of clouds because they handed me the camera for the day. And then from that moment forward, it was pretty much nonstop shooting. And I think it was somewhere around high school, mid the 90s, digital cameras started to come forward. And all of a sudden I realized you could take as many photos as you want. And I wasn't going to get in trouble for taking 24 exposures of a cloud. So, digital kind of took a hold of my career in around the late 90s.
Yep.
Certainly grew up on film and developing. And from there, kind of nonstop, worked in the technology sector, obviously, as you mentioned before, in Harvey's. And that was a pretty exciting time back in the early 2000s. And selling cameras actually was my was my craftsmanship. And then obviously shooting on weekends helped explain the differences between models and how to get the most out of your camera with customers.
Yep.
And then the next piece of that, as CameraPro understands, is the lens journey from there. So once you've got the body, there's a few lenses that might need to go in to complete the kit. And somewhere around 2006, there was an opening at Canon. Great opportunity to see a different part of the market, and obviously work in the brand that I sold so much of over the years. And it wasn't just cameras, I have to say. There's a lot of printers in there as well. So it's kind of not an image till it's printed. So
yeah, great, awesome. And then and obviously, how long have you been with Canon Australia now? Is it 16 years or a bit longer?
Yes, 2006, so 17th year this year. Quite a while, but that's not uncommon. There's a long tenure amongst most staff here, so it's not uncommon to see someone celebrating a 20, 25, 30. There was even a 45-year celebration just last week, so there's quite a lot of people here. Amazing. 17 years for me seems like a long time, but it's actually pretty young in the grand scheme of Canon.
Yeah, wow. And it obviously gives credit to the retention within Canon in Australia as well, and the passion obviously that their employees bring to work every day to be there for such a long time.
Mate, it's a fun workplace. I've got to be honest. If you're not learning something new every day and not having fun, it's probably time to do something else. But I have a ball. The people, you've got insight to our business. The people I work with. Yep. You saw them firsthand last night. They're a great bunch.
Exactly. They're all passionate at what they do, and they're not only that, they're passionate people talking to retailers, to everyone. Obviously, you've had affiliations with a lot of retailers across Australia, and I guess the fun part of it for you is you get to share your passion with a lot of other passionate people in the retail sector. So it's obviously. So as someone that's worked within Harvey Norman, you know exactly what it's like and the passion that those retailers bring to work every day. So it's a pretty cool insight.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's not a rarity to find people who love their job. I have to say in retail, it's a mix of both worlds. You've got those customers who come in and really appreciate the service that you provide. On the other hand, you have some days where they're not, that nice. But, all in all, I think most people in retail are people, as it sounds funny, people. Yeah. But love to have a conversation and have a yarn. And I think CameraPro envisage, the same aspects I do, in that if someone's walked out happy, you've solved a problem, then
Yep.
that's a win.
Big time.
That's a great outcome.
Yep, absolutely. And obviously within CameraPro ourselves, we've never been one that have pushed a sale. We're all about knowledge and envisioning the final outcome and going along for the journey. And I believe Canon, in a lot of its direction as a company, is very, very similar. So we do share, I think, a lot of beliefs that the passion is what shines through in everything we do. So, and everything that Canon does, I believe, is very much along the lines of that.
You're right. We probably don't push the mission statements and those sorts of things as wide as we used to 20 years ago. But I can recall when I started, there was a line, something about enriching consumers' lives through, the technology that we offer. But essentially, what that translates to is gear that makes your life easier and essentially more enjoyable. And I had this very conversation with my 7-year-old on Sunday night around the importance of taking photos to help mark memories. And it was one of those touching moments where it was cool to reflect on why we take photos and why do we print photos, and what those memories were. She was asking lots of questions about family members past, and that was kind of it was a little bit emotional to go through that with a 7-year-old, but it was kind of a refreshing thing to say, hey, we should take more family portraits. Like literally this weekend, we should go to the effort of some more family portraits. So it's as you said, it's not just a service or a product. It's listening to people and hearing out what they want to do. They come to you with some curly ones sometimes. They got an idea on what they want to achieve, and then you go, okay, there's no out of the box solution for that. Let me think about it.
Yeah,
and it's
for sure.
That solution that's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really great thing and a really important message as well. Because as someone that's known you for quite some time, now bringing up a family yourself as well, and I remember obviously as a kid and having those family portraits and how big even if I wasn't doing photography, how important an image is and what it implies and the things that come along with it. Because without these photos, you're almost without a memory to some degree. So it's a pretty cool thing, regardless of what we're doing. So I think that's awesome. That's a good message. And yourself starting with photography, when did you sort of find yourself loving photography? When did you sort of think that maybe it was a little bit more than a hobby or a passion on the side?
I think you know the answer to that story. That's why you're asking. But it was probably somewhere in high school around the darkroom and the magic of the photos coming to life in the fixer. And it was at that moment. It's like a chemistry. It was probably more of a science than it was an artistic approach. I just loved the fact that you got to mix stuff together and it smelled good. And then you drop the so it's a bit. We
talked about this fixer addiction before, but for those who don't know, me and Cole go a fair way back. We've done another video a couple of years ago, almost to this day. So, but the smell of fixer is something that never goes away in your mind.
Yeah, it's not an addiction, I swear. It's just it's one of those memories you just it's like cotton candy. You smell it and it brings back a memory.
100%. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay. So it started from there, and then it's obviously progressed into your other interests, which is more so going out bush, essentially connecting with nature, connecting with land. Why is that something that's really important to you, Cole?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky over the last couple of years to work in the collective team, and we did a lot of work with Australian tourism and in Queensland, obviously Queensland tourism, and we got to see some really cool stuff. Places where a lot of people don't visit. It's because they're busy, going off overseas and doing it. And that's cool too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just we live in such an awesome place. Why not share that with the kids now? So I look back at it and we invested in a caravan, which seems really weird at my age that I would get a caravan, but anyway, I've joined that crew. And we're taking the kids places that we love to enjoy and literally spend a week in not necessarily in nature. Like obviously there's some luxuries around what we're doing, but it's just about also spending time and money in local tourism markets as well. Supporting Australians essentially within that piece. So
For sure. And just looking at your Instagram and the photos you've taken over the years, you're almost like a Tourism Australia billboard as such, Cole. But as someone who's got to see it firsthand, connected with the people that are involved in these companies as well, as you said, Canon Collective, you've met everyone from the pilots to the resort managers to, you know, all those people that are employed basically to show people around Australia. So I think it is a really good message as someone that's seen it firsthand how beautiful Australia is.
Absolutely, it's gorgeous. We had a saying, a few years back within Canon. It was "No one sees it like you." It was a catchline for a slogan for a campaign for a while.
Yep.
And it's so true. You know, you look at it from people's views, it changes, you know, depending on who they are and where they sit. And it's just beautiful to be able to go to the same location with a group of 30 people and they all take different photos.
Yep.
And they've got a different way and approach to it. So literally no one does see it like you. And, that's probably the biggest kick was having 30 people with, different attitudes and characters coming to it, a different situation or same situation and coming with a different outcome. It was awesome.
Beautiful. And a good question early on by Robert. And anyone that wants to ask any questions tonight to Cole, he's a great man to ask questions for. Please shoot them through to the comment screen. But we've got Robert Smith here, and he asks, what got you into underwater photography, Cole? This is a good one for you because it's a bit of a labour of love. But want to give us a bit of an insight?
Certainly. Like, I guess going back to school, I was a swimmer. I went through competitive swimming through high school and into early adulthood. And anytime I get in the water, I was happy. So the surf included. And often I'd wear goggles in the surf just because I wanted to see what was under the water and the sand patterns. A bit weird, but also I didn't so much like salt water in my eyes too much. But you got a combination of that. And then I think it was the local chemist sold a disposable underwater camera. And I went from there. So that was probably the first underwater photography I took.
Yeah.
That was, you're getting bashed by a wave. You're trying to use it didn't really work. What do I do? But I became a diver after that. Basically did my PADI course, became a diver. Later in my Canon career, connected with Darren Dew, who I've known for 15 or so years, but worked very closely with over the last 10 particularly. And with Darren, sort of went the next step, went pretty deep in terms of Nauticam housings and some pretty expensive gear to come up to speed pretty quick. But eventually, I was talking to Phil about this earlier. The crux of an award-winning image to me is an image that someone looks at and scratches their head and says, "I've not seen that before." Or the question is, how did you do that? And I think particularly with underwater, if we think about all the people who are on Earth, there's probably a very high percentage that have never seen the ocean. And then those who have seen the ocean or been in the ocean have likely never gone below 5 meters, for example. So the stuff down there, they really haven't seen maybe other than a Nat Geo documentary. So I'm bringing photos to people who have not seen that before. And they kind of scratch their head and go, wow, that's awesome. And tell me about it. And that's, to me, that's maybe it's not a prize award winning type photo, but it's certainly heartwarming and mind warming. So
great, awesome. No, that's really good. Thanks for answering that, and great question, Robert. We really appreciate it. So obviously underwater photography, if we touch again a little bit on that, what would your current gear be, or what gear would you sort of would you say to someone that's starting out, maybe doing a bit more underwater photography? What would be a good starting kit, do you think, in Canon realm?
Glad you asked. I think there's 3 steps really. There's entry level, meaning something like a G series, PowerShot G series, so your $1,000 kind of camera. And you can get an underwater housing for those for less than $500. So, and that's good for 40 to 60 meters of dive. So that's all the diving you'll ever do. So you're talking $1,500 for a starting point for underwater.
Okay, which is not too bad in the grand scheme of things, especially considering how deep you're going.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. From there, you'd go to maybe a DSLR or mirrorless, interchangeable lens camera option. Today it's kind of 50-50. Do you go mirrorless or DSLR? It kind of depends on what you already own. So some people may already have like a 90D, for example, in which case you just need the housing to go with it. And so kind of step 2 is probably something along the lines of an Aquatech, a what I would call a positive displacement housing. So they're only good for about 10 meters. But to be fair, that's where all the good snorkeling is. 10 meters is not that bad. And
when you've got accessible light as well, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah. No need to worry about strobes and things at the first couple of meters. And their housings start from about just over $1,000. So that, again, that's $1,000 is still a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, the next step, which is your full Nauticam setups, you can really quickly spend $15,000 just on the housing and lights. Then you've got the camera on top of that. So you kind of got your $1,500. Let's pretend you don't have a camera and we're going for like a EOS R7 or something. That in an Aquatech is probably going to set you back about 4.5, 5. Then you go to
once you get the lens ports and the and obviously the housing as well, whichever housing you go with, that can be quite expensive. But as a surf housing, the Aquatech stuff is really good as well. There's a few other good brands out there too. Yep.
And then your next step after that's probably 15 to 20,000, depending on how deep you want to go.
And you've got
slope.
Yeah, exactly. And you obviously can go down the rabbit hole with that, something if you're really passionate about as well. But you've got a pretty good Nauticam setup from memory with your rig.
I had a couple. Still shooting. So underwater at the moment for me is still a DSLR approach. And the reason for that is due to the cost of the housing. So it's not just a swap to mirrorless and that's going to cost you $5,000. It's the $15,000 worth of housing that goes with it. So for me, the underwater aspects are still a DSLR passion. Everything on land now for me is basically either R5 or R3 mirrorless.
Sure. Yeah, great. And for those that want to know a little bit more about mirrorless versus DSLR, from someone who works inside of Canon, what's the best way that you would describe those? It's a tough question to answer, but also an easy question at the same time. But if you want to give us your take on why someone would go a mirrorless camera over a DSLR and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I got to say we make both, so kind of got everyone's interests in mind. DSLR, super battery efficient, proven technology, been around for many decades now, relatively easy to repair and service. On the flip side, you've got mirrorless, which is reducing the flange distance from the back of the lens to the sensor. Therefore, the lens can be technically of lesser quality and still retain an overall excellent image. Or the way I prefer to look at it is make the lens to the same standard as the Alt series of lenses and get an even better result than you thought was possible.
Sure.
And I guess a pro for that side of things is there's probably less overall serviceable parts in a mirrorless, but probably the only big pro con is mirrorless use more power. So you generally probably need to carry a spare battery if you're really into your photography. And as we're DSLR, will probably go, twice the frame rate off the charge. So you're talking about a spare battery being $100 or $150, depending on the model. That's a small price to pay. So for me now, recommending mirrorless or SLR, it probably comes down to the feel in people's hands. Some people like to look through the viewfinder and see through the lens, with their own eye, in which case DSLR is the only way to go. Other people, which is more common now, is I want something that is lighter than what I currently have. And that's where mirrorless kind of takes the cake in terms of overall weight of gear.
Yeah, for sure. Would it be a fair description to say a DSLR is kind of like your 80s Land Cruiser, and then you've got your mirrorless Tesla?
Okay, I mean, kind of they're I mean, I probably wouldn't take a Tesla across the Gibb River Road in Western Australia, but so like they're built for purpose. But like if you take a 1DX as an example, I always said like a 1D series, it could save your life. It's a hammer of a camera, like a Swiss Army knife of you could bash a tent peg in with it and still don't do that, by the way. and still like they're built for a reason for that, and they are widely abused and step up for more, as where the mirrorless generally is a little bit more sensitive to that kind of behavior. But yeah, there's lots of technical reasons between the two. I think what's really important to note here is that video as a category is emerging massively. It's probably the biggest growth market within camera. And when you start looking at the specifics of video, a camera with basically an electronic shutter or a sensor that can read out completely in one phase is really important. And that's where mirrorless starts to step aside from DSLR.
I kind of describe it to customers in store. It's both will shoot a great image, and you both can achieve an awesome image. But what I think is different is how you get to that final image, and that's where it, I guess, differs quite a little bit. You've got all the advantages of frames per second. You've got all the advantages of face and eye tracking and being able to see the shot exactly as it is almost at the time of taking the photo, compared to DSLR. You're made to work a little bit more. You'll get a more rugged body. You'll get better battery life, but essentially you will get a good photo as well. But how to get that final image and maybe the time that it takes to get that final image, I think, has been a big step up for the mirrorless cameras. If someone was starting out today saying, I'm learning, I don't own anything, my first thought is R10 or maybe R7 if they would like to go that little step further. But the reason I say that is because mirrorless, as you know, has exposure. I'm sort of lost the term. It will basically show you what the image is going to look like as you change things. Correct. So you change aperture, you change shutter speed. The actual image on the screen or through the viewfinder is what's going to happen. So it's a great learning camera that if I turn the dial that way, so rather than thinking about it in f-stops and shutter speed, if I turn that one to the left, it's going to get brighter. If I go to the right, it's going to get darker. And so it's a better learner's camera, I believe. Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that, Colin, because I think back in the day, especially when I was learning photography myself, my first camera was a 7D, and there wasn't much available online. Like, you don't have your YouTube access that you had back then. And it was kind of like you really had to work a lot harder to learn about things like the exposure triangle, shutter speed, aperture, what they do. Whereas now, you can pick up a camera like the R10, R7, have this great autofocus, face and eye tracking. You can see the images that's happening, even in an auto mode. The way it can read the auto white balance and exposure, and the metering of the camera is pretty phenomenal.
You're 100% right. Yeah.
Cool. And that is a great point. But I think what's important too, for those out there that have a system, and I think the biggest thing that we talked about as well is Canon really encourages people to stick with their system a lot, whether that may be have an EF glass and using it with the adapter. What I think was important is bringing the adapters out with things, and this is what we didn't see, I guess, with other brands, is things like your ND, variable ND adapter built in to the adapter itself, which I think is an important thing that kind of gets overlooked. Having a polarizing adapter, you can swap it out for a clear one as well. Things like the control ring adapter, having the ability to assign something to the control ring over previous EF lenses with the new bodies. Like, there's obviously been a lot of support there, and foresight to acknowledge the people that have already been invested in the Canon system.
Yeah, glad you brought that up. That comes from the community. So, we hear you when you give us feedback around what you would like to see in a camera. So things like the control ring, that came in quite a few years back. And I think, I've been invested in the R series within Australia for a few years, and we were testing it here before release.
Yep.
The control ring, the way to be able to change ISO quickly without having it be inside to a button, adding more custom buttons to the front of the camera where your index finger and so forth sit on the inside. Your little finger, sorry. That's all feedback to basically make it easier and more ergonomic for you. So the idea being, you create your own muscle memory, you set the buttons how you want to set them. The lens adapter, to your point, we don't want to restrict people from saying, well, here's a new camera, here's a new lens system. Thanks for buying those last 6 lenses. You need to buy 6 more.
Sure.
As much as we would love people to transition to RF glass over time, we want them to see the value in doing that, but at the same time, not restrict them from using the investments that they've made in the last 30 years. And I think that's really important because some lenses are, a pricey, output. And so you want to be able to get a lifetime's use out of your lens. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the time too, and I know you had a big experience with the EOS R being the first mirrorless camera in Canon's lineup, and I know how excited you were. I think you've gone on to say previously this is the biggest shift in cameras since 1987. Do you want to describe why you thought that originally?
Yeah, so obviously in 1987, I was a child. So, what came before that in the FD mount is in the history books for me. But I have experienced that for anyone who's wondering in terms of the film side of things in FD mount. But we went to EOS, which was electronic optical system. Basically, in English, all that meant was the contacts were moved to the bottom of the lens. It gave us the ability to have autofocus in the lens. Image stabilizers came not long after that, again in the lens. And so we had this ability to communicate, between both parts. And then when EOS R came out, which was the R series, essentially our mirrorless series, we're able to expand. So you notice if you open up the front and have a look, there's now 14 points of contact. And so imagine it like a highway. There's more information going back and forward between the lens and camera than ever before. And so now we've got the ability to have up to 8 stops of stabilization, which you saw on the R7 is phenomenal in terms, especially when you're shooting video. Again, coming back to that video market, you kind of don't need the gimbal now. 8 stops of stabilization is very easy to handhold and do it professionally. And so little things like that. And then, of course, the control ring and those, again, that two-way communication is greater. So, the old system still had its merit, but it had its limitations in what we could communicate and how we could work with, in-body stabilization, for example. And then have the lens have its own kind of microprocessor to communicate with the camera and share the load. More expensive lenses have more expensive glass in it, but also more expensive electronics in there as well. So to be able to have, if you pick an R7, for instance, the lens has to perform like it would on an R3 or a different camera as well, like an R5. So you don't necessarily always need the most expensive camera. The lens is still going to give you the same benefit on all the R series. And so, expansion to that technology was core to be able to bring us more, essentially.
Yeah. And I guess what's clear to me as someone that's been in the camera industry for the last 5 years and seeing the EOS R coming out, the RP coming out, and then I've seen Canon go almost back to the drawing board and say, all right, these are two great cameras here, can take great images, but where do we go from here? And I think it's clear just looking at those two cameras and then the following two cameras, essentially like something like the R5 and the R6, it was clear that Canon took a lot of things on board. Like they tried a lot of things like 28 to 70 f2, which I think is an insane feat of engineering. Things like the touch bar that may, have been a gripe for some people, but also a love for some as well. But then learning from that and adapting and listening to people. And I think that's been pretty clear and transparent along the way, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I got to say there also, it's really important not to be necessarily the first to market. It's really important to make sure it's right before you're to market. So, we had a lot of feedback where's your full frame, 50 megapixel-ish, mirrorless camera. The R5 was the answer to that, essentially. Yes, we were working on it for a long time. Want to make sure it's right. It had to have things like the dual card slots. You would have remembered the consumer feedback around R series. It had to have the things that people were asking for. 8K video was, when they announced that to me, I was like, oh really? We're going to go there? 8K? Okay. Right. Like, it's one of those things, if you don't use it, that's okay. But it's there. It was such a class-breaking camera for its time and still is. It still leads the market in terms of the value offering for mirrorless in a studio-based professional camera system. But like I said, it's really important to get it right and release it once, essentially. And then from there, you build and you establish a trust. The product's going to be good. And so then when a Mark II or a Mark III or a Mark IV version comes out over the next 10 years, as you've seen previous DSLR generations, people will make that purchase without having to question, 5 other people or find out a review, or, they know it's going to work. It's going to be great.
And patience, I think, is a virtue, because people throw out specs and say, oh, why can't you do this, why can't you do that? But I think what's clear and what's evident as well, Canon will make the necessary changes when they feel they're ready and right in their lineup. And not only that, they the software and firmware updates to cameras to improve them more so, and which is another benefit of mirrorless cameras too, but has been pretty evident. Like cameras like the R5C, I think are a really good example, not only with strong firmware updates, but applying things that people wanted in a camera that can do amazing stills and amazing video has been very impressive.
Yeah, I was going to say probably the biggest gripe we get these days is, why don't you have one that does everything? But I guess if you have a conversation with people about the physical roadblocks in place to have a camera that can literally do everything, it's easy to understand then. But if you look at it realistically, if you want a cinema camera, there's a cinema lineup. There's video-related R series that are stronger than others, like the R6, for example, is a bit of a video beast. And you've got, if you come down to the new R10, R7 as well, the 7's got all those extra little bits and pieces that have been inherited from the R3, R5 even. So kind of surprised that a sub $3,000 camera would have all the cool fruit, like the face tracking, eye detection, even 4K video at that price point. So it's important to go, there's the right hammer for the right peg, if you know what I mean. And sometimes that means 2 cameras. So, talking to a professional today, he says, I've got an R5 and an R6 for 2 different reasons, but at the same time, one can be the backup to the other if something goes wrong. And that's really important as well, to have a backup plan as a professional working photographer. And they don't necessarily have to be matching bodies. They can be, like in that person's case, they use their R6 predominantly for video and the R5 predominantly for stills.
Yeah, really good point. I guess for those at home that have been invested in the EF system, or still use DSLRs and unsure of how the roadmap kind of sits, or where they all sit in line, would it be fair to say, like cameras like the R5 replaces the 5D series, the R6 replaces the 6D series? Did you want to sort of fill in the blanks there for anyone that has those and unsure how it sits at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I should have given you a picture of our little pyramid we use, but essentially,
that would have been
I wouldn't use the camera
perfect.
place. I'd say they sit side by side. So to explain to people at home, one of the things we show CameraPro from time to time is where a new model fits into the scheme of things. So if you can imagine a pyramid, you got your 1D right at the top. That's your number 1 camera, and then from there down you filter down. So a 3 series, 5 series, 6 series, 7 series, so on and so forth. And so an R5 essentially is today's version of a 5D Mark IV. An R6 is today's version of a 6D Mark II. So not necessarily replacing, but sitting side by side in terms of the feature set, who would use them, and also, roughly speaking, price point. Obviously, there's an aging difference between the two. So a 5D 4 days is cheaper than an R5. That's simply because it's been out for, I think, off the top of my head, 3 years longer or 4 years longer. So it's priced a bit lower these days. But the numbering system works backwards. So 1 being the best, you can't get better than first place, working your way down into double-digit, triple-digit, 4-digit camera series.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I've got to say, the stuff down the bottom there at the bottom of the pyramid, that's the foundation of photography, and the youth of tomorrow picking up a camera and joining the team, essentially. And so you'll see over the future, we'll have even more and more video features coming into that entry-level space as well, to help build that foundation for the future.
And it's as you say, talking before about the video features now, like and how big and burgeoning the video industry is. It's crazy that even your R10, your R7's coming out with fantastic video. Like the ability, to go over your 30 minutes on the R7 is on the record limit. It's fantastic. That's a great direction as well. And so by no means are you getting, just an entry level camera. You're getting a content creator's kit essentially, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, YouTube particularly has been a huge blow up sector for vloggers and video content creators. Instagram was that big blow up for stills photographers. Then they tried to put a bit of video in there, but if you look at it seriously, YouTube is the vlogging capital of the internet. Correct. Then off the top of that, you've got other feed systems like Twitch and other subscription services, which have also helped feed that gap and get people wanting more, better gear, essentially, to produce a great result. But I was going to say something that's worth pointing out here is outside of Hollywood, you've got the Bollywood Indian movie sector. Outside of those two spaces, Southeast Queensland and Sydney in particular, we're making a lot of movies. We're making a lot of Hollywood blockbuster movies in this country. It's a huge growth sector. And the reason they're making them here may be for, cost associated reasons, but it creates a huge opportunity for tomorrow's video content creators, sound operators, gaffers, even catering. Like the industry is so wide in terms of what they need. And Village Roadshow just announced that the big project at Yatla, $6 billion expansion of studios just to feed the movie industry in the next decade. So, if there's some guys that are watching this and girls that are watching this at home now, and they're in high school and they're thinking they want to go down this path, there's a really good path to follow here in Australia and really have a profession that is widely regarded and very unique and specific and, to be fair, a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point too, and a segue to bring up things like Canon Masters, Canon Ambassadors, Canon Creators. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those three categories and maybe the mentorship or inspiration they're giving the next generation too? Yeah,
it's important, obviously, to celebrate our users, essentially. So we try and celebrate our everyday users via our social feeds. So you see Instagram is self-populated. When I mean self-populated, I mean community populated. It's photos celebrating you. Facebook's the same. We do it, no one sees it like, and then insert photographer's name, and we do a bio every week on those people as well. So that's our core range community. That's our heartland. From there, there's a series of ambassadors as well, like James Simmons and Jared Sang, and we've had them on this before in the past and in the future again. They sit in that space where they're working professionally, maybe vlogging / podcasting. I would say kind of media related ambassadorial program. And then you've got your masters, which are essentially working pros in a specific field of which they are the best of or regarded as one of the best of. And again, you've had them on the couch before in these series to talk about specific photographic genres. And not to say that, a Darren Jew couldn't pick up a camera and do a family portrait, because he certainly can, 100%. And he's kind of pigeonholed as the underwater guy. But truly speaking, he's a tourist or tourism advocate. He's a travel advocate. He loves taking photos. He loves taking photos within his backyard, as in, you got your camera, there's your space, go do it. So these people are highly skilled, but we probably portray them sometimes as being they just do that, and that's definitely not the case. I know Mark Horsburgh very well, also obviously supercar photographer, known for his motorsport outcomes. But to me, the first time I met Mark, I realized he's a businessman. He knows how to listen to a client, understand what they want, basically create a job sheet to go, I need to address these things for you, and then come up with some have you considered ideas, and then he goes and executes that. And that's more than taking photos. And the same goes for Kelly. Kelly is a marvelous business person as well in terms of what she does. It's not just babies. There's workshops in there too. There's education. There's printing. There's so many aspects. It's not just taking a photo. And so the masters in vision, to me, is someone who's got it kind of sorted, and they are someone that you can go to and say, well, I want to do this. I need some advice, and that's where they sit in the structure.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that you're very proud of the reputation of being a Canon master and being in that esteemed group. But not only do they represent Canon, but they represent themselves so well. And you're right, they're all multifaceted individuals who do an exceptional job in photography, but people skills, knowledge, and representation. So I think that's really important as well, Cole, and a really good point.
I was going to say they're also a great point of call for when we get to a point of testing something or requiring some feedback on something. So we'll obviously listen to the community also, but we'll get the masters involved in hands-on or feedback all the time as well, just to make sure that it's right. So they're very crucial to our business, and we love them dearly. And then in return, we also celebrate their successes as well. So
absolutely, and some of the nicest people you'll ever speak to. Mark Horsburgh comes here quite often at CameraPro, and honestly, I don't think you could find a nicer bloke. To be honest, he's just a really great individual. So all of the Canon masters do an exceptional job representing Canon and themselves. And you're right. I think it's an esteemed thing to be a Canon master or a Canon creator or Canon champion. I think it's really important. So yeah, it's a really good point. What advice would you have for people that want to be recognized by Canon? What advice would you apply to those that want to make that next jump?
Sure. I think, like, speaking broadly to the audience here, is the everyday creators. Instagram's probably the quickest way to get stills, out there and shared. And we just use the hashtag Canon Australia as a generic kind of tag to get the media team's attention to look at what people are doing. But more so than just sharing a photo, what about the story behind that photo? Picture's worth 1,000 words. It's always nice to put a little bit of an information around that photo on an Instagram post. And that information could be something like, I woke up this morning and this is how I saw the light, and what attracted you to it. And then even for me, I'm a bit of a tech camera head. I love to see shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and kind of delve into that a little bit more and go, oh, okay. So Instagram definitely for the still side of things. When it comes to video, obviously TikTok, YouTube, you can still do video on Instagram as well. Again, using the @Canon Australia or hashtag Canon Australia type tags will certainly get through the cut through for the guys to see it and have a look at it. In terms of next steps, I guess the other question that comes up is, how do I work in this profession or in this particular genre? As saying before, let's take football for an example. I want to shoot the grand final of the NRL in a couple of weeks. Probably not going to get there between now and grand final day in 2 weeks, but we got to start somewhere. So essentially, grassroots footy, local footy team, get in there, get your boots dirty, and build from there. And then as time goes on, you'll be shooting. Potentially it might be under 12s, under 16s. You're moving on to under 21s, B grade. Before you know it, you become a professional within that genre and respected for your image creation. You'll be invited to come and do more. And you never know, you may become full-time employed for one of the media agencies and, go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tool that you can, like, it may with you at any point in time as well. Like, a camera is just something you can just take with you on the daily, and it's there. You can capture moments almost instantly. There's not many industries that you can really say that about, where you've got something on you where you can constantly create as much as you want to. And as you're right, you don't play, you don't pay AFL just by wanting to kick a ball. Essentially, you've got to earn through patience and hard work your position to get there. So you've got to start in the reserves and work your way up. So I think that's important. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And the result is what you're putting into it at the end of the day, and the recognition doesn't happen instantly. It's a labor of love over time, which is important.
I'd say get involved in as many activities as you can with the camera. So whether that means it's a photo meetup, it's an Instagram meetup, like a photo walk, or someone's doing an astrophotography workshop or something. I got involved in a group of telescope enthusiasts 15 years ago when I was trying to figure out how to take proper star trails in the digital space. Something I hadn't done in college. And so these guys, they don't have cameras, but they have telescopes. And then we found ways to adapt cameras to telescopes. And next minute, we're best mates. And collective years came along, and we started introducing those space enthusiasts to our photographic group. Next minute, we're shooting Saturn with 1200 millimeter, 12-inch mirrored stuff that we never talk about really, but there's cool photos. Like I'd never take a photo of the rings of Saturn in Brisbane using what came out of a boot of a car. It can be done. Again, going back to that thing before, if you've got an idea and you want to do something, ask lots of questions. The internet's a fantastic space for collaboration. Just say, hey, I want to shoot Saturn, for example, and the results will come.
Yeah, brilliant. And touching on that too, on our next point, is that community or that online aspect, because that is growing stronger by the day, stronger by the week, where you can get constantly inspired or insight or knowledge. And Canon themselves, with people like Darren Jew, doing his community aspect as well. Do you want to tell us a bit about their work or their knowledge that they share for Canon as well?
Oh yeah, I think. Do you mean as in the collective community of?
Correct. Collective.
Yeah. Yep. So collective means a lot of things to a lot of people. Some of the audience may not know what it is. Some would have been from the original days, but collective was an idea of bringing like-minded people together to share knowledge. And as I said before, we are a company that we pride ourselves on having a good time. And as our friends and business partners is the same, and the end consumers. If you're having fun, we're having fun. So collective was there to kind of push the envelope of knowledge and education in a safe, fun environment. And we kind of utilized everything at our fingertips in terms of whether it be a sunset, a city walk, a street walk, anything that you could possibly think of, we were doing. And so we would organize those afternoons with 12 or 24 people, whatever the flavor of the month was at the time, how many we could fit into that event. Fast forward to these days, it's all online driven basically. So there's still the Canon Collective community on Facebook. It's still managed and moderated there, and we encourage people to again post ideas. You can post a photo and say, this is what I took this morning and I love it, and what do you think? You can ask for feedback. You can say something along the lines of, I'm just looking for a field of sunflowers. Can someone help me to find a location? And you'll have the community come back and say, hey, I know a place, and here's a map, and that's how you get there, and share maybe settings as to where to start if I've got a tricky shot coming up, or just a good share of information and knowledge, and have that community come together and say, well, my experience is this XYZ, and someone else will say, yeah, I agree with that, and this is to add to that. So that community still exists, and it's still there, and it's still completely free of charge.
Yeah, awesome. And touching on that too, like you've got your Canon Light Awards, Click Awards, and things that Canon do put a lot of effort into as well to find that next generation, or that encourage that generation of creators and image makers, and I think that's important as well.
Yeah, it's worth acknowledging at this point also, it's not all Canon running those things. There's a lot of volunteers and a lot of passionate photographic ambassadors in the community that run those things. So even the local show, I'm thinking of the Pine Rivers show, for example, or the Lord Mayor's photo competition. There's so many out there that are calling for people to pick up their camera and take a photo. And a lot of effort goes into that. So yes, there might be a big prize to win at the end of the day. That's kind of not the point. That's great for the person who wins it, and I appreciate that they do all those things. But the whole point of it is to bring the community together and do something. Get off the couch and get out there and take a photo, pick up the camera, even if it's in the backyard. And so those people are putting in that effort. It's a small part that Canon plays to help sponsor and nurture and guide those events. But a lot of volunteers that generally go nameless behind the scenes are running a lot of those things. So we thank them very much for their community engagement, which is for the greater good.
Absolutely. And just touching on that too, Stephen Finkel, we've got a question. He asked, what was your favorite Canon Collective event?
Can I have 100 different favorites?
How do you nail that down to one?
Yeah, I'm going to say top three would have to be Steve Irwin Wildlife Reserve in Weipa, far north Queensland. That was a 7-day event that we did a couple of times. Greg Sullivan also did one a year I couldn't make it. The beauty about that place is the Cape is so unpopulated, and there's just so much wildlife and activity going on up there that I had never even thought about. I'd been to the Cape once before as a tourist to go see Bamaga and up towards the tip, but never really got involved in the wildlife up there. And just a simple thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, they will in the comments, but I think it was something like 3/4 of all native Australian bird species can be found in Weipa.
Wow.
So it is a bird watcher's paradise up there. So that'd be probably number one. Number two, probably anything underwater, except for in the middle of winter. Then underwater was at the bottom of my list. But anything underwater, the whale season in Tonga with Darren is amazing. Anyone who wants to do it, just do it. Don't ask questions. Just book. Just do it. First time you jump in the water and you see a bus in front of you swimming and it's got eyes and it's looking at you, I can't explain it. It's awesome. And then probably number three, just simple events like Sea Air's Outback Tour, where they go do Lake Eyre,
Simpson Desert,
and kind of look at parts of Australia that you might fly over on your way to Singapore or something, but we did it at 1,000 feet and did the aerials of all those locations and come back across the country. They're probably top three. Yeah,
for sure.
Put me on the spot on that one.
No, great question, Steve. Now I just pulled up some images, Cole, as well. I've got some here, which maybe if you want to talk through some of these images, because they're standout images, they're beautiful images, and these are probably your experiences with Canon Collective and other personal trips as well. But I've just popped one up here, and then we'll sort of talk through. This one is was it Vanuatu? Where was this one?
That's Tonga.
Nice.
My first thing that pops to mind, it was 1/250th F11 ISO 400. That's the technical side of me coming out. But yeah, that's a whale, obviously, showing a belly, and that's just literally shot as it was ascending for a breath, probably at around the 10-meter distance mark, and it was a 16-35 from memory. And the reason we processed that, I use the term processed or developed rather than edit. I don't edit photos, I develop them. It's developed in black and white high key is just because of sediment in the water that day. So if we had it as a colorful photo with the blue background, you would have seen all of the sediment in the water. Tonga is beautiful, crisp, clear. It's the place to go to see this. But some days it can be foggy, and this was one of those moments. So you just process differently.
Yeah, cool. Got some of these cheeky ones off your Instagram as well, Cole. So it might be a bit of a blast from the past.
Yeah, that's I remember they were 5DSR shots, and that's an 11 to 24 mil lens set at 11 mil, and it was propped up on a hat. I know that one of the other collective members got a photo of me setting up the camera with the hat and add sticks and rocks and things, because the emu is not going to come near you. But I was using my phone to trigger the camera via Wi-Fi and just basically waiting for the emus to come in. They were super inquisitive as to what's this thing on the ground and kind of pecking at the hat. Can I eat it? And that's the photos that come out. So pretty cool. Yeah.
Another good advocate for the Canon app, the excellent Canon app as well. We've got a remote shutter. You can send images across to your phone really easily. It's one of the best apps I've used in that photo sharing market. So it's really good as well.
Lemurs, Australia Zoo. So lucky enough to go and meet them face to face. And again, from memory, that one was 8 to 15 fisheye, and that was slightly zoomed as exposure occurred. So like 1/15th of a second and twisting the zoom at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool.
And so the way the 8 to 15 works, without getting into the physics of it all, but essentially the center of the image can remain solid and correct, I guess, as where the outside edges of the image start to fall away, and that's the result of that. So you're probably 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters from the from the nose there. So very, very close.
Wow.
Just being kind of different. Yes. We called that the Boss. That was Lady Elliot Island, probably at a depth of around 12 to 14 meters and lit with 2 strobes either side. So it's a very dark scene. That's what the natural light is at that kind of depth. And so, yeah, there's a turtle kind of hanging out on the coral, and I'm all up in his grill taking a photo. Great. But, yeah, it's a
Lady Elliot, obviously you're a big turtle lover. I can see you were doing Turtle Tuesday for a long time as well. Is turtles your favorite? Is that your spirit animal?
I think, yeah, people go to Lady Elliot for manta rays. Generally speaking, that's their postcard animal. Yep. But some days you don't see them. Some weeks can go by where they don't have them. And then other weeks you can see 20 in a day. Wow. As with turtles, there are always turtles. There's just an abundance. You will not be disappointed if you say I'm going there to shoot turtles. I'm like, you're good, guaranteed. Zua kingfisher, kakadu, 600 mil, 1DX3, I think 1DX2 maybe. Kakadu. If you're a bird lover, again, that far north part of Australia, whether it be the Northern Territory or far north Queensland, again, 3/4-ish of the native wildlife in this country in terms of bird wildlife are there. So get your camera out in kakadu, definitely. You need a teleprime, or you need a telezoom at least. 100 to 500 range would be great.
Yep.
And probably something like a 16 to 35. You could do kakadu on 2 lenses, no hassles.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, they're beautiful. That's Africa. Lilac-breasted roller, if I remember correctly. It's a few years ago.
Definitely. I did see the caption, and you are correct, sir.
Okay, good. I was correct then, so I must be correct now. Just gorgeous bird. Couldn't tell you much about them. Only been to Africa once. Was there for a few weeks with Jay running a tour, and there's a lot of colourful birds over there. Not colourful mammals on the land, but yeah, just a lilac-breasted roller sitting in a tree. Really
beautiful. Another Turtle Tuesday pick.
Yeah, early morning. I can tell by the way the sunlight's coming through, like rays of sunshine. So don't be afraid to get out there first thing in the morning at sunrise. Always take a buddy with you, of course, for safety in the water. But to get that kind of effect, just go really late in the afternoon or really early in the morning. Again, Africa, definitely not the Cape of Queensland. But funny moments where we were making fun of how tired they looked, but nothing particularly spectacular about that. Just a funny photo.
Yeah, beautiful. There's some great images there. And if anyone wants to check out Colin's Instagram, there's some epic shots over the years that he's done as well. And we could go on for days, Cole, with some of the images you've got there. But as you said, some of the best places you've ever been to sound like they're Australia.
Absolutely. I'm a fan of travel. Don't get me wrong, but we've got so much stuff here that I don't think most Australians have seen. And that can be from Tasmania all the way to the tip. There's no favourite spot particularly for me. Obviously, close to home is easier, but I'd just say get out there and get into it. Take your camera with you, and whether it be something like next week I'm going to do a cordial factory tour with the family because, hey, what kid doesn't like sugar? But I'm going to take the camera with me. Something's going to happen. I know it'll be great. Yeah. Worst case scenario, we all come out with plenty of red cordial. It'll be great.
Spoken like the family man you are now, Cole. Yeah, cool. And that's again really important things. Just taking your camera out, carrying it around with you. Doesn't matter what camera. And you haven't tried to sell a particular camera tonight. There's no driving force from you at all in what camera, whether it's EF or RF, which is really exciting as well. Do you want to tell us about some of the promotions Canon's got at the moment? I know you're doing some EF and RF lens cashbacks.
Yeah, again, as you said, there's a lens cashback on. That's more about rewarding the secondary, third time purchase, fourth time purchase for people. So I know a lot of people have lenses on their wish list for Christmas and so forth. So we popped that one in there with a dozen or so options, not specifically RF or EF. There's a good combination.
Yep.
That's just about being able to sort of fight. I don't want to say it's fighting inflation or anything as such, but it's just giving more purpose and reason to buy something now and giving the customer a reward for their loyalty and their purchase. And it's a big thank you, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think that what's really good, any customers that are looking to get an R5, R6, and a few other cameras out there, like the R3, the control ring adapter as a bonus is a really good incentive as well to jump into that system.
Again, people who have got it DSLR, they've got an invested lens range. Well, just make it easy. Everyone wants a good deal, and that's kind of giving them a bonus that they don't have to negotiate, and we'll get them shooting immediately without additional purchase. And then maybe next time they'll get another lens, and that's okay. In the meantime, they can duck into a retail showroom like yours, and as you can see over your shoulder, grab any lens off the shelf, try it on for size, shoot some test images and take them home and pull them apart, make a decision in time, talk to the staff at CameraPro about what your needs and wants are. And again, going back to what we said earlier, if you've got an idea, we're all here. So whether it be Canon online via Facebook, Instagram, walk into CameraPro, talk to CameraPro via the live chat. If you've got an idea, let us know. There's really nothing too hard. There's always a solution. Sometimes it takes 48, 72 hours to have a think about it. There are some curly ones, but if you've got an idea, we'll give it a crack. We'll be able to help you into the right outcome, essentially.
Really good advice. Really good advice. Finally, last question for this evening. I've got Robert Smith again. Thank you, Robert, for another question. What is your favorite dive site and why, Cole? Because I know you're a big underwater guy.
Yeah, it's really hard to go past the Southern Bunker Group in Queensland here. So we're talking about Lady Elliot, Heron, Lady Musgrave, those island systems. So Heron and Lady Elliot are both great locations from a stay and play point of view because they've got resorts on the island. Lady Elliot's kind of where I fell in love with that place the first time I went, through to the many dozens of times since. And then my kids have also grown a connection to that place as well. So if in terms of the actual site, to answer your question, Robert, probably Severance, the shipwreck that's out there. Severance is just cool. It's kind of eerie. You descend 30 meters or 25-ish meters, to a sunken concrete yacht that went down about 20 years ago. And I don't know, there's something cool about a shipwreck. No one was hurt in it, so it's okay. But yeah, that's probably my favorite. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's been a fantastic experience, Cole, to have you on board. A man who, as I said, has been within Canon for 17 years now. Great insight, really passionate. You're not someone who's just there to sell cameras. You've been a photographer through and through, and you're a people person as well. You've got a wealth of experience, but also passion for the next generation coming through, which is really evident in a lot of things you say, Cole. So we really appreciate the time you've given us tonight. Now, just finally, for those that are saying the R3, R5, R6 magical cameras, surely Canon can't do any better than that. Have you got any insight for the future of where Canon's going with their mirrorless range?
Yeah, look, what I would summons to say would be there's always things in development. It's a non-stop here at our end, and certainly over in Japan, Tokyo, where our head office is. Those guys are always working on stuff. When we can talk about it or what it is specifically, there's always a date and a time for that. Talking about specifics earlier than those dates and times would mean that I wouldn't be working at Canon for 17 years. And maybe be doing something else. But what I would say is there's always a roadmap for the future, whether that be more lenses or better cameras or cameras with more features. There's always something coming, which is really exciting. The main thing is, what's the best time to buy a camera? People ask all the time. It's today.
Great question.
It's what do you want to do with it? There's something that fits your needs today. And so it's talking to someone like yourself, Jax, even if it's over a coffee in the CameraPro showroom informally. And again, coming with those ideas and going, this is what I want to do. What have you got? And so there's always a hammer to fit the peg to fill that hole. So just got to ask the question. But innovation is what drives us. Having a good time definitely drives me and the team that I work in. And that's talking cameras specifically. It's a very bright future. We're taking so many more photos than we ever have before, and we will continue to do that as generations get older. And just don't forget what you're doing it for. We're marking memories. We're taking historical documents essentially, and it's really cool that they're digital already, because the good archival practices, these photos are going to be around forever. People are going to be looking back on it, and that's kind of cool. We are historians with our cameras.
Awesome, Cole. Well summarized, good sir. It's been absolute pleasure and a treat that we've been able to share this journey together as well. So thanks for coming on tonight. And yeah, the future is looking really bright at Canon, and we appreciate everything you do. I'll let you go home now, because I know you've stayed in after work to join us this evening, as the dedicated man you are. But again, really appreciate your time tonight.
Always happy to share. Thank you for having me.
Legend. Thanks, Cole. Perfect. Now, we do have another announcement as well coming up on October the 4th. We have a superstar of the social game, Benjamin Lee. He's done some really great works, and as Cole was saying, the next generation, really innovative, really creative, and he's one of those people that are really on the forefront of doing a lot of social stuff. So anyone that wants to tune into the content side of things, you really get a treat with Benjamin Lee coming up. But we've got a short video that will show you. Again, thanks for joining us this evening. It's been a real treat listening to Cole. But yeah, tune in October 4th, Benjamin Lee. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a great evening. Thank you.